Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live community classroom with Michaels. We have our friend Tamara Kelly with us today to learn to crochet a leaf for fall. My name is Renee L. from Yarn Inspirations, and I'll be helping with any questions you might have during today's class. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that Tamara answers them. While we're getting ready to kick things off, let us know where you're watching from. Over to you, Tamara.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara from Moogly, and today we are making these wonderful fall leaves. Now, this is a really fun pattern because you can turn it into the garland like we see in the written pattern that you may have gotten when you signed up for the class. If you didn't get that, do check the chat. I'm sure they'll be putting the link there. So you can turn it into a garland where we hang it up from the stem, but I think these look really cute on their own. They make a decent sized coaster. They're just real pretty laid on a table. You can do all sorts of different crafts with these. And like I say, it's only 3 rounds to make these. We're going to be using Red Heart Super Saver and, let me double check, a USH hook. That's 5 millimeter. So you want to go ahead and take your time now, find the end of your Red Heart Super Saver and start pulling up a little bit of yarn. And we'll go ahead and come on over to the hand camera so we can look at what we're doing today. Oh, I have it upside down. Let me get that straightened out. There we go. Here is our beautiful leaf. This one I made in the Red Heart Super Saver. I'm going to use a little different color today to demo with so it is a little clearer on camera. But you can see it's a beautiful 5-petaled leaf. You can already see a little bit what those rounds are. We've got a round there, and another round where we make our leaves and the stem. When we make these, you'll be leaving a little hole in the end there of the stem that we can use to string those up on our garland if that's something you choose to do with your leaves. As I mentioned, we're using Red Heart Super Saver, and there are some color suggestions in the pattern, but you can use any of the colors you've got handy to go ahead and make your leaves, even if it's not a natural leaf color. If you aren't able to get a hold of Red Heart Super Saver, you'll want to make sure today that you are using a worsted weight yarn, a 4 worsted weight yarn if you're using that H hook. If you've got some, for instance, Bernat Super Saver, you might want to move up to an 8 millimeter crochet hook. You can still make the pattern, it's just going to make a much bigger leaf. So like I say, let's take our time, find the end of your Red Heart Super Saver. Red Heart Super Saver is one of those ones you can pull from the inside. So usually to the right side of the label, you'll find the end that's coming out. Every once in a while, I think a label falls off in the store and somebody slips it back on the other way around. So it might be at the other end, but it should be to the right of that label there. So we're going to go ahead and pull up some yarn so we can get started. Once again, I'm using worsted weight. That's Red Heart Super Saver yarn. And this is a USH 5 millimeter crochet hook. This one happens to be by Susan Bates with the extra little aluminum handle here. And just for the reference here, if you're watching this later on YouTube, this is the pattern we're following, the Fall Leafy Banner pattern. You can find free on yarnspirations.com. So let's go ahead and get started with our first leaf. I'm going to be using this really pretty green color. This one is actually called Spring Green. So what we do first is we start round 1 with what's called an adjustable ring. This is similar to a magic circle or a magic ring if you've made those before, but it's just a little bit different. We're going to wrap our yarn into a ring, ensuring that the tail falls behind the working yarn. So when I read that, I think the easiest way to do that is to sort of fold it over itself like that so that our tail is behind the rest of our loop. Then it says to grip the ring and tail firmly between your finger and thumb. So we're just going to hold on to that right there. All right. Then we are going to insert our hook right in that loop there. Let me do that again. It's a little different than I'm used to doing it as well. So it's a little awkward for me. But we're going to just cross our yarn like that and pitch it between our fingers. And we're going to go in with our hook. And we're going to be able to start stitching just in the ring like that. Now, like I say, this way is to me a little awkward. I find a little easier if I put the tail in front and then put my hook in that way and then pinch it there to start working into it. Alternatively, you can make a slip knot however you normally make your slip knot, and chain 1 and work all your stitches for the first round into that first chain. Again, and you could also use the magic circle. All of these techniques are viable. All of these techniques are great. It's just about having a circle there in the middle that you can close up really tightly. So whatever method works best for you, you just want to get a loop on your hook here that you can start crocheting into. Again, whether that's magic circle or just make a slip knot and chain 1 and then work everything into the chain, whatever works best for you. We're going to start after we've got that little ring. We just want to chain 1, and then we're going to work 11 single crochets into the ring. So you can see it's kind of like we've just chained anyway, and then we're going to be working back into that first chain. However you want to think of it, we just want to have a loop there that we can pull totally closed. So we want to work 11 single crochets into the ring. So we're going to go right back in there and pull up a loop. Pull through 2, and there's our first single crochet. And that should stabilize our loop a whole lot better here. As I work into it, I'm going to try and work over that tail as well. That'll make it a little easier to pull it all closed when it's done. I'll get a little bit closer here so you can see. Got that one right there. So it's one of those techniques where everybody does it a little bit differently, but however works for you, we just want to have a ring there that we can work back into. So there's 3 single crochets, and we want a total of 11, which is kind of an unusual amount. If you've made projects before working in the round with single crochet, you might have started with 6, maybe 7 or 8, and that's kind of the standard amount to start with a circle for a single crochet. This project, however, uses 11, and it still works. In fact, I think it works really beautifully. So it just goes to show some of the flexibility we have here. You can definitely play with the numbers that you may have learned in the past. So let's see how many we've got here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got one more to make into that ring there. Let me make sure I'm working with the right side of the yarn there. Don't start crocheting with the tail. We've all done it, I think, at least once, right? There we go. And there we go. Now we've got 11 single crochets into the ring. I saw somebody request to do the single crochet again. Let me pull one of those out. I can do one more. For the single crochets, let me get centered there. We're just going to go right into that ring, yarn over and pull up a loop, 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through 2. So now we should have 11 single crochets made, but because this is our setup row for the whole rest of the pattern, we want to make absolutely sure that we have 11 stitches there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I'm counting those little V's right at the top. That's what lets me know where each stitch is there. So with that, now I'm going to put my hook under that first one we made and slip stitch to join that first one. But we've got this big gap in the middle and we don't see that in our leaf. So what I'm going to do, I'm set my hook down here so it doesn't roll away. And this is where I'm going to pull on that tail. I like to stabilize my work a little bit, which means basically pinch it while I pull on that tail, and I can feel it. You can see how it's starting to get a lot smaller. So we want to just gently keep pulling on that until it closes up completely. Red Heart Super Saver is a great yarn for this because it's pretty tough. It doesn't break easily. You can really give it a really nice good pull and close up the center, there we go, of that leaf just as closely as we can. And now all 11 of those single crochets are squeezed right in there, and we're ready to begin round 2. Were there any questions before I move on to round 2?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, great. So round 2 starts with a chain of 2, which counts as our first double crochet. So what I want to recommend, and this isn't listed, I don't think, in our supply list, but if you have one handy, this is a great opportunity to grab a stitch marker. There we are. Mine all wanted to stick together. There we are. So this one's a little harder to see because it's yellow. Let me grab a blue one. There we are. These are some crochet stitch markers. These are a great tool to have in your crochet notions box if you don't have them already. They're basically little plastic safety pins that you can use to mark your stitches. And these are a great handy tool for any crocheter. If you don't have stitch markers, I recommend grabbing a paper clip or a actual safety pin, or even just a little scrap of yarn if you happen to have that handy, because it's very helpful if we mark the top of the stitch, the first stitch of this round. It'll help us remember that this chain two is something that we are going to work back into. Because normally when we have a chain two at the beginning of a round of double crochet, which is what we're going to be doing here, we don't work into it as a stitch. This pattern is just a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and chain two. But because I know that second chain is going to be one I'm going to work back into, I'm going to pull up my hook just a little bit more, make it just a little bit bigger than the other chain. That's going to make it a whole lot easier to get my hook back in there when it's time to work into that in round 3. Then I can go ahead and just put my stitch marker right in the top of that loop. Now, there is an alternative. I think for this pattern, the chain 2 is pretty indistinct. I can't actually see it without really taking a hard look and figuring out where that chain 2 was. But I do want to show you an alternative that you might like a little bit better, and that is going to look a lot more like the other double crochets in your project. So what we're going to do, get it good and focused here. I'm going to pull this yarn loop up to the height of a double crochet. Now I've been making single crochets, so I've got a pretty good eyeball of about how tall a double crochet with this hook and this yarn should be. So I'm going to pull it up to about that height, maybe just a hair taller. Then I'm going to use my finger here, this one right here, to secure this loop on top of my hook. I want it to stay in place. No matter where I move that hook, I want the top of that loop stuck to the top of that hook with this finger. Then I'm going to yarn over with the hook itself. This is where you've got a little play here. We want to try and keep things taut, but if you need to pull up a little more as you go, you can. We just literally yarn over with the hook, or with the loop itself. So let's do that again. I'm going to pull up that loop to about the height of a double crochet. I'm going to secure it with this finger, and then I'm going to yarn over with the loop itself. When I do that, I want my hook to come about down to the top of the fabric. This one's got a little bit more space than I like. So I pull that loop a little bit smaller, secure the top, and do it again. Now I can see the side of my hook there is at about the surface of my fabric, so it's in the right place. I yarn over again with the working yarn this time. Or actually, before I do that, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I've got it to the right height here. Then, one more thing I need to do before I can yarn over is insert my hook right in that first stitch. Right there. Let's get that a little closer there so it can focus. And I yarn over with my yarn and pull up a loop. And then I can yarn over and pull through that loop and behind the big loop that I yarned over with. And then finally, I can release that top loop and yarn over and pull through too. Now I know that was a lot, so I'm going to do it again. But you can see this looks a whole lot like a double crochet without having to chain 2 or 3 or any other double crochet substitute. So let me pull that out and we can do it again. I did get a little lost there in the middle. All right, I've got my hook and my loop there. And this is what you do. This is only for the first stitch of the round. This is to replace a chain double crochet start. We're going to pull that loop up to the height of a double crochet. Secure the top of that loop with your finger. Yarn over with that loop itself. Go into the first stitch. Yarn over and pull up the loop. I've still got my finger on the top of that loop. So now we've got the loop I pulled out through the stitch, the big loop that I yarned over with, and the top of that active loop that I've secured with my finger. So then I can yarn over, pull through that first loop and behind the big loop, and then finally release the top of that loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And that is called a chainless starting double crochet. Because it's the double crochet, we can use to start the row without having to make any chains. So for this pattern, you can either chain 2 and mark the top of this one, or you can do a chainless starting double crochet. Now, this is completely optional. This is just a little upgrade that I wanted to share with you today because it is a pretty simple pattern. And this is the kind of move that while it might not make a big difference for this pattern, it might make a big difference in your next crochet project, especially when you want to have really nice looking edges on something with sides to it. So let's go ahead and make our next stitch. We need to have a double crochet in the same stitch as our join. So whether we chain 2 or work the chainless starting double crochet, we want to double crochet back in that same stitch again. There we are. So now I am going to go ahead and mark that first stitch. Could have been that chain 2. For this one, it's a chainless starting double crochet, whatever you like to use for your first double crochet. Then we continue on around for round 2, just working 2 double crochets in each stitch. So double crochet, we yarn over, then we go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. And then we do it again in the same stitch. So now we have 2 double crochets in each of the first 2 stitches there, and we just continue that on around. So in round 1, we had a total of 11 stitches. They were single crochets. In round 2, we'll have a total of 12 stitches. That will, 22 stitches, because we had 2 in each of those 11 stitches. That will include either that chain 2 or the chainless starting double crochet, if that's what you chose to work instead. So 22 total stitches. A little bit of a tongue twister there. So for now, I need to just continue double crocheting on around. Were there any questions I could answer while I continue making those double crochets?
Nothing in the chat just yet, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them.
Absolutely. And if you have other ideas for what you can do with this pattern, like I say, this is such a great component. It would also make a great applique if you wanted to make a bunch and put them on a tote bag. I think that would be really pretty. You could attach these to a crocheted table runner, just make a really simple, basically long scarf for your table and add a whole field of these beautiful leaves and maybe some flowers for your table this year. I think Thanksgiving's already passed in Canada, but here in the US, we've still got that to celebrate. So just lots of options. Lots and lots of options. So yeah, if you guys have some clever ideas and ways you think you'd like to try and use these leaves, definitely drop those in the chat too, and we'll try and read them out. It's always so much fun to hear of the ideas other people have had for these sorts of things as well. So
Totally. This is one of those patterns where it could be a coaster if you made some changes to it. It's one of those really good ones just to have in your arsenal. You can use it for almost anything.
Absolutely. And really, you could use it with any yarn size. Like I say, today we're using the worsted, but you could use thinner yarn for small leaves, thicker yarn for big leaves. Definitely make this one a stash buster. Grab all those colors you've got and go ahead and make those. So before I count my stitches here, I want to point something out. You'll see this little magic circle or adjustable ring in our center is starting to open back up. That can happen. That was a lot of stitches to be working in there. So if you find that happening while you're crocheting and you don't want to go ahead and leave all your weaving in ends for the very end of the project, sometimes you'll want to go ahead and secure that adjustable ring in the center. So to do that and make sure it doesn't come open on us again, I'm going to go ahead and put it on my yarn needle here. And if you look here, you can kind of see this is the direction I was crocheting over that tail. So I'm going to extend it under maybe just a couple more stitches going that same direction. And these are really tight in there. So if you need to go into the second row, weave in that end, you can. But I just want to make sure that I go that direction and then pull it really tight, as close as I can get it, and make sure I go back the opposite direction. That really is such a key to locking in that magic ring or adjustable ring right there. So I saw a little question pop up, but I'm sorry, it went by a little too fast for me to catch. Renee, can you help me out?
You got it. Stephanie said, I am struggling connecting the second to 22nd stitches to the first double crochet. I wonder if
Well,
she means like the last one and the first one when she's sealing it up. Oh,
no.
no.
Okay. No, we'll wait for more clarification on that then. Sorry about that. We haven't joined round 2 yet, so I haven't shown that yet. But basically here, you can see I went back and forth, and now it's not popping open again. It's going to just go ahead and stay closed. So Stephanie said starting the entire second part. I'm thinking you mean the second round, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got a good amount of time on this one. So let's go ahead. I don't want to pull anything out, but we're going to go ahead and make a little one here in our orange just to get you trying caught up here. This time I'm going to go ahead and use the magic circle. It's a lot more natural for me. The way I like to use the magic circle is I go over my finger twice towards me. I go under both of those loops with my hook, grab the first one and pull it just under the second one, yarn over and pull that loop through, and then I'll chain one and start single crocheting into that ring and over the tail. That was a pretty quick overview, I know. I do have a separate tutorial for that on YouTube, but I just want to go ahead and get us started here with this little one right here. So I'm going to race through this guy right here really quickly. I'm probably not going to make a full 11 single crochets into that ring. But again, with this one as well, I want to make sure I go over that ring and that tail so that I can pull it closed here at the end. So let's go ahead and pretend that I've got 11 made. Just for the sake of time here, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch to that first one. There we are. Okay, so this is our first round. To start our second round, if the chainless starting double crochet is confusing, or if you just want to make it the way it's written, we start with a chain of 2, just 1 and 2. That second chain is going to count as our first stitch. So that is somewhere I would definitely recommend that you put a stitch marker. There we are. Because otherwise, as you come back around, it's going to be really easy to overlook that one. Then we want to double crochet in that same stitch. So a double crochet is yarn over, go into the indicated stitch, whatever stitch you're told to go into, yarn over again and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So this would count as 2 stitches worked into the same stitch. And we're going to continue to do that all the way around, but now we don't need to chain 2 again. We can just go back to double crochets. So we go to the next stitch. Well, first we yarn over, then we insert our hook in the next stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Then we do the same thing in the same stitch. Yarn over, go into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So we want to have 2 double crochets worked in each one of those stitches around. After we've done that, it will bring us all the way around our circle here, and we should have a total of 22 stitches. So let's double check, make sure we didn't accidentally work into any of the slip stitches or anything. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So we know we have the right number of stitches. I always like to count before I join. It's just a whole lot easier to see where you started and what's the last one. So now I know I've got my 22 stitches. So I can just go right in the top of that stitch. Now I'm joining here to a chainless starting double crochet. If you started with a chain 2, you'll be slip stitching in the top of that chain 2. So go ahead and pull that closed. And that is what it should look like after round 2. Alrighty, so now we've got round 3, and round 3 is, I think, where it gets to be really fun. This is the round where we're going to make our petals. Now, if you look at the written instructions, this might seem a little confusing because the instructions just say petal in next stitch. Well, what does that mean? That's not a standard crochet stitch, not one that I know of anyway. We need to go over here to our special stitches. So on your PDF, it should stay right there. And the special stitch for the petal reads, we want to work 2 double crochets, 2 treble crochets, chain 3, slip stitch in the third chain from the hook, 2 trebles, 2 doubles, all in the indicated stitch. You can see why they abbreviated that in the pattern, but we're going to work it together. So it looks like a lot, but as you'll see, it really makes a lovely leaf. And once you see how it comes together, it's pretty easy to memorize. So round 3 starts a little different. Most rounds start with a chain of some sort. This one does not. We are going to skip the same stitch of the join, so the stitch that we joined to, and make our petal in the next stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and get this stitch marker just on out of the way. I think we're probably done with that one for this project. This right here, get that really close and in focus here. That is the stitch that I joined to. So I'm going to skip that one and make our petal in the next stitch. So that second stitch of the round. So to make our petal, we start with 2 double crochets. We yarn over, go into that next stitch, pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Then we double crochet again. Yarn over, go into that stitch, pull up our loop, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have 2 double crochets, both worked into that same stitch. Now we're going to do the same with 2 trebles, again into that same stitch. So treble crochet, if you haven't made it before, a lot like a double crochet, but instead of yarning over once, we yarn over twice. Same way towards us. Let's do that again. We yarn over once and twice. Then we insert our hook, in this case, into that same stitch. Yarn over and pull up our loop. And you'll notice we have 4 loops on our hook. There's the active loop we started with, our 2 yarn overs, and the loop that we pulled up through the stitch. So to finish off a treble, we yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, still loops left, yarn over and pull through 2 until we've got 1 loop left on our hook. That's really the only difference between a double and a treble. Of course, that ends up being a lot taller, but the only difference is we start there with our 2 yarn overs rather than 1. So we yarn over twice, go back into that stitch. Once you've got a bunch of stitches worked up here, it can be really easy to accidentally pull your yarn up over this way, and then you end up getting some strange large loops. So make sure to take your time and really kind of pull that loop around the side of the stitch so that you're not catching the previous stitches inside the stitch you're making now. So then we yarn over and pull up our loop. Got those 4 loops on our hook again. We just work them off in pairs. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So we've got all those loops worked off. So far we've got 2 double crochets, 2 treble crochets. The next step is chain 3. We're going to just 1, 2, and 3. Then we slip stitch in the third chain from the hook. It was 2 double crochets, 2 triple crochets, chain 3. Now we slip stitch in that third chain. So what I like to do, you can see those 3 chains there. I think it makes it look really nice and smooth. I slip stitch into that bottom loop of that first chain we made. So there's those 3 chains. I want to get this really close here so you can see it. I'm going to flip that chain over and find that underneath hump of the first one we made. And don't worry, we'll be making more petals. So I'm just going to slip stitch right in that first chain of the 3 that we made. And that just lets my chains lay really smoothly so they don't have to twist. Let me pull that out so we can do that together one more time here. Of course, like I say, we will be making more petals, but we've got 2 double crochets, 2 treble crochets. Then we chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we slip stitch in the underneath or under the chain hump there of that first chain we made. Then we've got 4 more stitches all to work into that same stitch. 2 more trebles followed by 2 more double crochets. We're going to, as you can see, we built up this side. Now we need to build down the other side of our leaf. So we yarn over twice again. We're going to go back into that same stitch. So really take your time and kind of pull that yarn over to the side of the stitch so it can go around it there. Pull up our loop and work those loops off in pairs. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we do another treble. Yarn over twice, go back into that same stitch, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So you can see those nice tall treble crochets there. Next are double crochets. So we yarn over just once, go back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Pull up some more yarn from my skein here, and we need to do one more double crochet. Yarn over once, go back into that same stitch, pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we have made one of those petals. We have officially petaled according to this pattern. So after we've got that petal made, we are finally ready on our instructions to begin the section that starts with the asterisk. We skip the next stitch, slip stitch in the stitch after that, skip the stitch after the slip stitch, and then petal after that. So let's look at our work here. We're going to pull this petal out of the way a little bit because there's so many stitches going on here all in this stitch. It really kind of wants to cover up the next stitch. We don't want to accidentally skip too many or we're going to run out of room. So if you need to, you can kind of pull that petal back there. See, okay, we worked all those stitches into that stitch. So that is the stitch we need to skip. That is the stitch we slip stitch into. So we skip the stitch after with the petal and slip stitch in the stitch after that. We're not going to be working back into that slip stitch so we can make it nice and tight. You can see how that really just anchors down that petal on the other side. Then we skip the next stitch and petal in the stitch after that, just as we did before. So we've got our slip stitch, we skip the next stitch, and we start our petal in the stitch after that. And it's exactly the same. We want to make a total of 5 petals. So we start with double crochet, that's 2 double crochets, then a triple, so we need to yarn over twice. Just work those loops off in pairs, just like you do for your double crochets. And then again, yarn over twice, go in that same stitch, and work those off in pairs. So now we've got our 2 doubles, our 2 trebles. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Find that back hump there of that first chain we made and slip stitch right in there. So just pull that loop right through both those loops. And then it's back to the trebles. Yarn over twice, go right back in that same stitch. Work the loops off in pairs. Yarn over twice, and go back in that same stitch. I did not start the new petal in the stitch I slip stitched in. I slip stitched, then skipped a stitch, then started the petal in the stitch after that. That's kind of our repeat here. Skip a stitch, slip stitch, skip a stitch, petal. So now I've got my 2 trebles, my 2 doubles, my 2 trebles, my little picot here, our chain 3 and slip stitch. That's sometimes called a picot. 2 treble crochets, we need 2 more double crochets to finish off this petal, all worked in that same stitch. So there's 1, and there's 2. Now we can do that skipping again, because you can see we have finished our second petal. So let's do that again together here. I'm going to pull that petal that we just made really far out of the way here. I'm right-handed, so I'm pulling it here to the right. You can see right there is the top of the next stitch. This is the stitch I was working into. This is the next stitch. We're going to skip that one. We slip stitch in the stitch after that. So just pull that loop right on through. There we are. So there's our slip stitch. We skip the stitch after the slip stitch and then petal in the stitch after that. This lets us anchor down both sides of our petal and spreads them out around the area a little bit. So again, I'm starting. I've got 2 double crochets. Then I need to do 2 treble crochets. Here's our first one. Back in that same stitch for our second one. and then we do our picot. That's kind of what this little chain 3 and slip stitch in the first chain made is usually called. There's a couple different kinds of picots out there, some little different variations. So if you ever run into a pattern and said, oh gosh, I don't know what a picot is, well, that's basically all it usually is. Chain and then slip stitching back into the chain. It's used to give your projects this really great little point. So as we head into the winter months, if you ever make some crocheted snowflakes, you'll see usually lots of those giving those really great points. We've got the first half of this petal done, so we work our way back down. We start again with a treble here for the second half of our petal. So there's one, and then a second one. And you'll notice when I make that first one, it seems like the petal really wants to open up right there, but it really kind of pulls itself right together. A picot isn't always 3 chains. It usually is. That's the most common, but it isn't always. There are different size picots, but sort of forming that little chain and crocheting back into it to get that little point, that's usually sort of that class of stitches. So we've got our 2 double crochets, 2 treble crochets, chain 3 and slip stitch back in that first chain, 2 treble crochets, 1 double crochet. I need 1 more to finish off this petal. So there is our third petal. We've got 2 more to go. I need to make sure that I pull this out of the way so I can make sure I count my stitches correctly. I petaled in this stitch, so I skip this stitch and slip stitch in the stitch after that. There's my slip stitch. I skip the next stitch and petal in the following stitch. So I have to yarn over and just put my hook right in that stitch so I know exactly where I'm going to make all these stitches. So for our petal, 1 double crochet, yarn over and go back in. For our second double crochet, yarn over twice and go back in to make our treble crochet. Work those off in pairs just like our double. Yarn over twice, go back in for the second treble crochet and work off those loops. And there's the first half of our leaf. So now we need to do our chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Here's the top of the chains. We want to kind of flip those over so you can find that back hump of the first chain that we made. Slip stitch in that chain. And now we make the second half of our leaf. Yarn over twice. Go back in that same stitch. Pull that yarn. It's starting to add up, so we want to make sure to pull that yarn around the side, not over, so that we catch those stitches. Just right around the side there. Pull up our loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And yarn over and pull through 2. 1 more. Yarn over twice. Go back in that same stitch. You can see we're getting all those stitches all in that same stitch there. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through 2. So now just 2 double crochets left. Yarn over, go back into that same stitch, pull up our loop, and work it off in pairs. You can really kind of manhandle this yarn, so give it a little tug if you need to. Get those stitches out of the way so you can see where you're going. 1 more double crochet into that same stitch. And now we've made 4 petals. So we want to take our time. That's the stitch we were working into. You can see all those stitches going right in there. That's the next stitch, so we skip over it. We see the stitch after that. That's where we slip stitch. Slip stitch, skip the next stitch, petal in the next stitch. That's the place where our 5th and final petal will go. So we're going to take this one pretty slow together here. Got my yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over and pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. First double crochet made. We need to make another one. We yarn over from that same stitch, pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we've made 2 double crochets. Now we need to make a treble crochet. So we yarn over twice, insert our hook in the same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 3, or excuse me, through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. I was thinking about how we had to do it 3 times. But we yarn over and pull through 2. Just work it off in pairs. One more, we yarn over twice, go back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So those 2 double crochets followed by 2 treble crochets are the first half of our leaf. Then we chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We find that very first chain we made and slip stitch into it. And then we come back down to crocheting into that same stitch. So we yarn over twice for another treble, insert our hook, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we need another treble, yarn over twice, insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So all that's left for this petal is 2 double crochets. We yarn over, we go into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. One more. We yarn over, go into that same stitch for one more time, pull up our loop there, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And now we have a total of 5 petals made. So after we've made our petals, we go back to our instructions. That has finished our repeat. It reads a little funny, and this is something that kind of confuses a lot of people. The way the pattern reads, it says, do this repeat. We make our first petal, then the repeat with the asterisk tells us how to make the next petal. Then it says to repeat it 3 times. A lot of times people will accidentally include that one, but as you can see here, we want 5 total. So we've got the one before the asterisk, the first one we made with the asterisk, and then repeat 1, 2, 3 times. So that's a little pattern reading tip. Something that, like I say, tends to screw up all of us when we start going too fast. Looking at your picture always helps, but we want to make sure we've got our correct number of stitches and petals made here. So after you've made the petal, hopefully we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how many stitches I have left. So let's hope that's how many we need to work into here. So let's look back at our pattern. We want to, our repeat ended with the petal, not with the skipping and slip stitching. So we end with that petal. Then we go back to our instructions. We skip the next stitch. Let's get that centered there. We've got our petal. We skip the next stitch and then slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. So there's our petal. We skip the next one, slip stitch in the next one, and then slip stitch in the stitch after that. All right, so there should be only one more stitch to work into after that. But before we work in there, we are going to be making our stem. So this is where we're going to chain 13. Now this makes the length of this stem right here. So this is where you need to consider how you're going to be using your leaves. If you're going to be stringing them up on a garland or hanging them up, 13 might be the perfect length. If you're going to be strewing them about a table as decoration, you might not want your stem to be quite as long. You might want a little bit shorter. You might be adding them to gifts or some other project. You might want your stem to be even longer. This part, the chain 13, the only thing it's going to affect is how long your stem is and how much yarn you use. You can chain this stem to be as long as you need your stem to be. So if you want a little short stubby stem, or if you want a big long stem, chain whatever number gives you the length you want, plus a few more if you intend to leave this little loop open in the end for hanging. So let's go ahead and make it the way it's written together. But like I say, when you go to make your own, you can definitely think about how you're going to use your leaves and how long you want your stem to be. Now we are going to be, what are we working in here? We make slip stitches back into these chains. So we don't want these to be super tight chains either. We want to leave these a little bit more room to stitch into. So I want to go ahead and just pull up on those a little bit as I make them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I believe, yes, 13 is what our pattern officially calls for. Then, because we want to leave this little loop on the end so we can make our garland, if that's what you want to do, we skip those first 3 chains. Get that to focus in a little bit there. It wants to flare a little bit here in our light. We skip those first 3 chains, find the next one, and slip stitch in that one. So kind of like our picot. It's really just kind of a big picot here on the end, but it leaves that little space there for us to string them up later if we want to. So again, if you're doing something with your leaves where you don't want to have that hole there in the end, then, just skip 1 chain before you start slip stitching back into the other chains, and that will close that right up. And like I say, you can make them long, short, vary the lengths, make it so that your leaves hang in different points off your banner. I saw, and I apologize, I didn't catch the name. Renee, maybe you can help me. Somebody had a great idea pop up to make like a nursery mobile out of these.
Yeah.
I think that'd be so pretty.
Yeah. Sam said, I can see a mobile. Same here.
Yes, that's such a great idea. Lots of options here. So, like I say, these chains you're just slip stitching right back down until you get to your work here, and sometimes that can twist around. That's what happened to me as I was slip stitching into those. You can see I've just slip stitched into each of those chains. I've got 1 chain left, so I do want to take the time to make sure here, if that's become twisted, that I untwist it. I can do that by looking at the tops of those chains and just making sure it's a nice smooth line here right back down to our project. So I go right into that last one with my slip stitch. And then, since we've slip stitched all the way back down our stem, we simply slip stitch in that very last stitch. What do you know? We did have just the right number of stitches available. Now, here the instructions simply say to fasten off. So what I want you to do, rather than just putting a knot in it and then having a weird little knot there in the side of your leaf, we're going to go ahead and cut our yarn. Leave a good, 5, 6 inches or so, 4 inches, whatever you're comfortable with, and just pull up on that loop rather than putting that little knot in it. So you can see there's our last stitch. And that slip stitch, and I've just pulled that loop right on up out of there after I cut the yarn. Then I will put it on my yarn needle. There we are. And so what I'm going to do to finish this off really nicely is I'm just going to find that next stitch. That first stitch of the petal may be right down there. And go right under those top 2 loops with my yarn needle. I'm going to pull that down, and then I'm going to sew right back down into the top of that slip stitch. You can get that a little closer there. So I came out, I went under the 2 loops of the first stitch, and I'm going to go right back down there into the center of that leaf. Then that just creates, you see how that makes that really nice and smooth, and it looks the same on both sides, and that way you don't get a little knot right there. That'll give you just a really nice finished edge on your leaf. And of course then you can weave in your ends just as you normally would. And if you feel like that magic ring or adjustable loop or whatever you use there in the middle needs some extra help, this is a great time. Go ahead and take that second end. You can sort of weave that in around that circle if you need to as well. So when you have made all the leaves that you want to make, of course, you can do with them whatever you want. Like I say, mobile is a beautiful idea. I love the idea of using these as appliques on all sorts of projects. I saw Renee mentioned there's a beautiful fall leaf pattern, or excuse me, a fall wreath pattern on Yarn Inspirations covered in teeny tiny leaves. I believe I actually did a Michael's class for that one before. And it is a really lovely piece. And it comes with some really small leaves, but I think it would be really fun to mix in some of these much larger leaves as well. Get a really beautiful and just a whole varied look. You could even put little buttons or snaps on them so you could change them out on a permanent wreath form. and have, different things that fit onto your wreath for different seasons. There's just so many great options. So after you've woven in your ends, then you can have some fun. So I've got this one we just made together, and this one that I made the other day while I was practicing our pattern before we get started. But I've got a few leftover beads and things from a previous project. Um, this pattern calls for, what does it say? Just 60 wooden beads. So obviously you can pick whatever kind of beads you want. They certainly don't need to be wooden, but you want to look for ones that are going to have a decent sized hole in them, like this one right here. The reason being, we're going to get either hemp or, I won't say if you go ahead and just use some more yarn, you're not going to be able to see the hemp cord. It's all going to be covered up with the beads and the leaves. So you can definitely, just use some yarn instead of the hemp cord if you don't happen to have any. But you do want to make sure that those beads have a nice big hole. If you haven't spent a lot of time in the beading aisle at your local Michael's, definitely check it out. There's some great options, but there's lots of beads with teeny tiny holes. Beautiful for jewelry making, not really ideal, unfortunately, for crochet projects because the yarn just won't fit through there. It's also just a whole lot easier, of course, if you can fit your yarn needle right through there as well. These are officially 12mm beads, but they come in lots of sizes and lots of fun colors. Like I say, the big thing is really to look for that hole. So if you wanted to, like I say, I don't have any hemp cording here at my house, unfortunately. But the great thing about this project is that cording all gets hidden by the beads and the leaves anyway. So I'm just going to use some extra yarn. Then I'll go ahead and thread it on my needle here. Try and make sure you've got a needle that does fit, through your beads. There goes that one. Let me grab a few more here. And then you just go ahead and start stringing these on. So it looks like for this pattern, they recommend, let me pull up the instructions here, 5 wooden beads followed by a leaf. So they've got a whole pattern, a whole plan for these written out on there, but they suggest you start with a double strand of hemp with a double knot in the end. So we'll do the same thing with our little guy here. I'm going to go ahead and bring those ends together, still on the yarn needle, and just put a little knot in there. That'll probably help hold our bead on a whole lot better. In fact, I want to make sure it holds my bead on, so I'm going to go ahead and do that again here. Give myself a nice big knot. Then I can straighten out my needle here on my yarn or your hemp, whatever you happen to have available, twine, kitchen string, whatever works for you. Then we can just go ahead and start stringing our beads on there. Let's see if my knot was big enough. We'll pull gently and see. Oh, just big enough. Probably want to leave a little extra there so you can actually hang up your garland. You can just take your time and string on your beads. And then I'm going to go ahead and just do 2. And then to string up your leaves, you've got that little hole right there. You can just send your yarn needle through as well. And then we go back to beads. We just want to make sure to pull both of those strands. That is one thing you'll want to watch since we have a double strand here of yarn or hemp. You want to make sure that neither of those get caught up inside those beads. But after that, of course, you can just keep stringing beads, more leaves onto your garland, whatever you want to do. You see these beads I got here, I didn't get a huge amount of them. They kind of came on a string that holds them all together. I cut one of them, the rest are loose. But I did notice at my local Michael's, at least, they have some really beautiful packages of beads, a lot more similar to what's shown in the pattern here. They have a variety of sizes and colors, so there's a really nice big multi-pack that you should be able to get over in the beading section with this sort of bead in it to make this sort of project. So let's see, we've got a few minutes left here. I'm going to cut free some of these beads so I can keep stringing. But are there any other questions I can answer, Renee?
No, just compliments about how clever you are.
Well, thank you.
We
Yeah,
love to hear it.
did we have any other ideas for ways you could use these leaves? Because I love that mobile idea.
Yeah, I love that too. I love that you could probably make a seasonal one if you really wanted to.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just the color of leaves that you choose and how you want to use them. Absolutely. And like I say, such a great stash buster, right? Do take your time though. Sometimes it wants to get caught between the beads. There we go. That's my one probably last tip for the actual stringing since I'm not a jewelry artist typically. But there we've got our 5, and then we'll go through another leaf. And I think you start to get the idea. And how you really, the one supply you can get away without is probably the hemp. It might be a little bit stiffer. It might give it a little bit more body, but I think yarn will work pretty darn well. So you can definitely do some stash diving and grab all your favorite colors of Red Heart Super Saver to make lots of beautiful leaves. Okay, I think that's probably it. So we could probably go ahead and come back to the other camera here. Here we are. Thank you all so much for joining me today. We're going to hold and see if it'll stand up here. We've got our fall leaf garland. Isn't that pretty? Such bright colors. You could do any of your favorite fall colors or spring colors or make them into whatever you like. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, you guys. I hope your October is going well, and I hope you get lots of crafting time this week.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to be saving a lot of these ideas. You guys, thank you so much.
All right. Thank
All
you. Have a
right.
wonderful night, everybody.
Thanks. And don't forget to share your work with hashtag Make It With Michaels and hashtag Yarnspo. It's YARNSPO. And just a reminder that you can find more classes on michaels.com and a recording of today's class at michaels.com/classes. Night, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.